Welcome to the Diversity Report podcasts, where we interview today's movers and shakers and diverse change makers. I'm your podcast host, Deborah Levine, editor of the American Diversity Report. And with me is Carol Potter. With an acting career which spans over 40 years, Carol is best known for her role as Cindy Walsh in Aaron Spelling's Beverly Hills 90210. She has also been seen on stages in New York, including the original Broadway production of Gemini, Los Angeles, and regional theater. In 2001, she also became a licensed marriage and family therapist. Welcome, Carol.
Welcome. Well, thank you, Deborah. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, a pleasure. I would like to explain to the audience that you and I first met as college students back in the 60s when times were changing for women, and our women's college, Radcliffe, merged with Harvard, and we women had the opportunity for new paths in our careers. But yours was particularly creative. How did you end up in Hollywood?
Well, yeah, that is a long and winding road. When I was a very little girl, people would ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I always said I wanted to be an actress. And then they would say, "Oh, you mean like Marilyn Monroe?" And then I would say, "No, a smart actress." So that was like my earliest thinking about who I wanted to be in the world. But high school, college, I got very interested. I was always interested in psychology, and so I studied social relations at Harvard, a really great sort of broad-based psychological view of humankind. And I always acted. I did a lot of productions at Adams House and a little bit at the main stage theater. But it wasn't until, we had all of these strikes and the anti-war movement, and there was this sense of things fracturing, and I just viewed that Vietnam documentary, and that's really an accurate picture of what was going on in the country at that time. Things were fracturing, and I didn't have the energy to, go to graduate school, pursue sort of like being a therapist. And I had some friends that I had known through Adams House who were at the Yale Drama School, and were putting together this crazy little theater company for this summer after I graduated. And and I just thought, I've always wanted to do this acting thing. Why don't I just give it a try and see what happens? And 40 years later, I found myself in LA. But I have to say, a friend was she wanted to interview a bunch of people and get their stories. And one of the questions was, what's the biggest surprise in your life? And the biggest surprise in my life is that I live in Los Angeles. It's something I never thought about. I never dreamed or imagined. And it still surprises me that I am here. And, after, after a couple of years in New Haven, acting at various productions all over the place, and getting involved with the Williamstown Summer Theater. And I was one of the founding members of this second company that they formed as a non-equity company. And then I sort of plopped myself in New York. I sort of had a plan to go to graduate school, but then I ended up getting a job. So I thought, well, I might as well just start working. And I was able to, I had some contacts from working at Williamstown, and I did the whole, I went to acting class with Michael Howard, and I, was looking for an agent, and enough people were interested in me that I was being sent out and auditioning. And then my big break in New York was doing the Broadway show Gemini. We started in Huntington, Long Island, and got to do 6 weeks at the Circle Repertory Company with Marshall Mason directing. And that was what really brought out all of the humanity in the piece. It's a comedy, but he really helped us establish the real emotional underpinnings of everything that was going on. And then we hit Broadway, and we opened on my 29th birthday, and the show went on to run for 5 years. So it was the long running hit, very funny. And I stayed with it for about a year and a half, and then I started doing a lot of television commercials, and then I got a TV series called Today's FBI. We shot the pilot in New York, but then when it got picked up for a season, we shot the season out in LA. So I picked up, moved to LA, sort of in a temporary frame of mind, sort of rented things, and had a sort of an amazing experience learning about TV work. I mean, I'd done commercials, but I hadn't done that much actual television, a pilot here or there. And so that was a real, sort of learning curve. And I just have been there ever since.
So how did you get involved in 90210?
Well, I was working with an agent, and I got a call. It was a rough time in my life, actually. I was a single mom at the time, and I was sort of like at this place of, oh God, I'm never going to work again. I had taken some time off when my son was born, and some other things went on, and I was I was definitely coming out of a lull in my career, and I got a call to come in and read for this part, and I read, and I must have read 3 times, and each time when I didn't hear right away, I would just dissolve in despair because I was convinced, oh God, I'm never going to work again. This is my swan song. And lo and behold, I got this part, and suddenly, a whole new world opened up. So it was a fascinating experience being part of watching this trajectory. It really would have been a great sociological experiment. Because of it started off very much under the radar, and then this as it caught on with teenagers, there was this groundswell of excitement and enthusiasm, and watching the effect on the young people, the actors playing the kids was kind of fascinating. So that was a great experience, and but I had the sense then that life was not going to continue being quite so lucky. And I was married at that time, and I had a child, and my husband was not working, so it was kind of on my shoulders. And so I kind of went back to what I'd studied in college. I got involved in a program at my church where we met with people, and we were supervised by licensed therapists, and I was getting such good feedback from people. I thought, well, let me try this out. So they let me go from the show, and that fall I went back to school and to get my master's. That was kind of fun being back in school again. Obviously, it was something that was always in my comfort zone, right? School. Mm-hmm. I knew exactly what to do. I knew how to do school. And it was a real eye-opening experience, really exploring psychology in a deep way. And it was a very experiential program. So if you're going to recommend something to your clients, they were saying, okay, now you have to go out and do that yourself. Because how can you recommend somebody go up, access some resource if you're not willing to do something similar?
Right.
So
right.
It was a very expansive experience, I would have to say.
Were you working on set at the same time as going to school?
Well, I was actually. After 9021. After I left 90210, guess a few years later. It was actually after I graduated. So I don't know. At the end of the 90s, Aaron Spelling started a soap called Sunset Beach, and he asked me to play the part of the mother. I mean, it was almost a very similar role, except we were from, you know, the Walshes were from Minneapolis, and this family was from Kansas. Joan Cummings. And so I played the part of Joan Cummings. I had 2 daughters, and we moved to Sunset Beach, California. My daughter, she's ready to get married in Kansas and realizes she can't marry this guy, so she flees to some, internet person, somebody she met on the internet who's her soulmate, who lives in Sunset Beach. And then, of course, her husband, her fiance follows, the whole town practically follows us to Sunset Beach. But it was an awful lot of fun, lovely group of people. And I would go to the set and, it's all about me. What do I look like? My hair, my makeup, what am I wearing? My emotions, my motivations, what's going on with me in this scene, in this relationship. And so I'd do that, for 4 or 5 hours. And then not always on the same day, but then I'd go to the counseling center where I was getting my hours. You have to get 3,000 hours to get licensed. And, I was working pro bono with people, and I could walk in that room and just leave all of my stuff behind and just focus completely on them, on their feelings, their understandings of their lives, their relationships, the ins and outs of their daily lives, and what was problematic and what was going well, and all of that stuff. And it was kind of fabulous, I have to say. The intensity of attention on me and on someone else was a really, really nice balance. And I don't know, I probably would have done that the rest of my life, but the soap got canceled. So that's what happens in television. Your shows get canceled.
Well, I gather that you worked with Aaron Spelling more than once.
Yes.
I guess you guys got along.
He was a real mensch. He was an actor before he got into producing, and he never forgot what it was like. And the first time I auditioned for him, which was probably the second or third audition that I had, I think I was reading with Shannon. But I walked into the room, and he walked right up to me and held out his hand. He said, "Hi, Carol, I'm Aaron Spelling. Thank you for coming in." He shook my hand. And I thought, wow, nobody does that. Nobody does that. You walk in a room and there's the strangers, mostly men, especially in those days. They're sitting back and they're just looking at you. And it was I just was very impressed with that. And he kept the common touch in a way, Yeah. He made a lot of money and had the wildest house. He had a bowling alley in his house. And but he never forgot kind of where he came from, in a way, and what it was like to walk into a room of strangers. So I just appreciated that about him.
Well, it's nice to know there were people like that, given what we're hearing about Hollywood
yes.
these days.
Well, it's so interesting, because whatever the good and bad is in human beings, I think it gets magnified in the industry. So you have these people like Harvey Weinstein and apparently Kevin Spacey, who use their power in these abusive ways. And then you have other people who are like bright, shining lights of humanity. So there's something about it. It intensifies everybody. If you've got bad qualities, they're probably, and you're not careful and you're not watchful, they can get worse. But if you've got good qualities, they also get magnified. So it's kind of interesting. the best and the worst.
Yeah, yeah. So do you stay in touch with any of the people that you acted with on these shows?
Well, I don't anymore. I've been sort of in the therapy world for such a long time. I've
Mhm.
kind of lost contact with that. Um, James and I used to run into each other because we would see each other at auditions, for
James.
TV and for commercials and things like that. So we used to run into each other periodically.
James
Of
who?
course, in James Eckhouse, who played the husband,
Oh,
he
yes,
played
yes.
the
Okay.
father.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Okay.
And of course, Jason moved back to Canada, so I wouldn't be bumping into him. And actually, the other person that I've kept in contact with is Anne Gillespie. She played Kelly's mother, and the first day I walked in and met her in the trailer, we discovered that we had grown up in towns that were right next door to each other. She grew up in Englewood, New Jersey, and I grew up in Tenafly, New Jersey, and we struck up a really nice friendship. And she is now an Episcopal priest, and she lives in Arlington, Virginia,
I
with
love
her family. Yeah, if you recall, she was the coke addict
it. Yes.
who had a child out of wedlock, and now she's a priest.
Of course. What else?
What else? Exactly.
Wow. It's amazing the trajectory of these careers, how diverse they become in one person. Because we can. Because we
Yes.
can.
Yes, and I think that, you reach different stages of life, and there are different things which are satisfying, and you have different intentions. I think one of the greatest gifts of being the age we are is I no longer have that drive to prove myself, to show what I can do. I mean, it's not that I've gotten back into acting lately, the last couple of years, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm doing some theater, and I really enjoy that. But I care more about what it is that I'm sort of conveying to people, and I'm less interested in this careerism.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's I had a small group through my church of a bunch of younger women who were in the business and struggling, and it was a way to provide community and sort of support for this is a really difficult business. Um, and I just remember thinking, oh my God, I'm so glad I've done that. I can let go of all that pressure,
Yeah.
and I can just focus on what it is that I am most interested in. And there's a lot of freedom in that.
When you encounter these young people with these dreams, do you
Mm.
give them advice? And if so, what do you tell them?
Um, I would say it was less about advice and more about support, because it feels you don't have any benchmarks. You don't have anything to compare it to say, is this normal? And I can say, yeah, that's what this place is like. You get the best of times and the worst of times. And everybody loves you 1 minute, and then 3 months later it's like, who are you again? And it's a very frustrating business. It can be toxic, so to counteract some of the toxic effects, everybody has some kind of casting couch story, whether it resulted in actual sexual abuse or not. There's lots of people out there who are pushing the boundary to see what they can get. Can they get you to take your clothes off? And it's kind of despicable, but that's because because people have this desire to do it. So it's so deep, and it's people are so driven and it's so passionate about doing it. And some people at a certain point, they say, this is not worth it. I'm going to do something that feels more healthy to me, or they start finding their niche, or that, okay, here's where it's working for me. But the other piece is, if you don't have a life, then you're really at the mercy of your career. And so try to build a life for yourself, whatever that means to you. Don't cut yourself off from, whether that means looking for a good partner or family, or, engaging in issues that you care about, or, friendship circle that's meaningful to you, whatever that is for you. Make sure you have a life that's not just about this business.
Absolutely. And you definitely
Yeah.
had that life, haven't you?
I have done my best to create that for myself. I remember when I was in my mid-30s, I was single, and I was very much wanting to start a family, and I just said, I'm not willing to sacrifice that for this career. First of all, the career was going nowhere at that point, so it wasn't much to sacrifice it for. So that was a real challenging time. Men have their midlife crises in their 40s. I think women have them in their 30s.
I think maybe we have more than one.
Yeah, well, that's true too.
Well, it's been such a pleasure to hear your journey. As I said to you earlier, I didn't realize you had the acting bug when we were students.
Yeah.
It was amazing to see you in Hollywood and see you on the screen. I loved it. It's just an amazing story, and I hope that young people will be inspired to see that all the good kinds of things can happen, and a lot of them come as a surprise.
Yeah.
Have to be open to it. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't mentioned before we wrap up?
I think that's sort of it, I guess, at this point. I mean, I think here I am. I've just picked up something else that I really love doing, which is painting. So, there's a continual evolution. And so I'm back sort of doing the acting thing, but also very much involved. I do landscape painting, and I want to take up some portrait painting. And so there's always something new that can enliven your life.
Absolutely. I can hardly wait to see some of your paintings.
Well, I'll have to post them or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
I keep saying that, and then I don't do it.
Well, we'll have to remind you, won't we?
Oh, thank you.
Always a pleasure, Carol. So I look forward.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Absolutely. I look forward to seeing you at our 50th reunion.
Yep.
And we'll trade notes again then.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you, audience, for again tuning in to the American Diversity Report podcasts. See you again soon.